Welcome to the Wisdom and Wilderness Podcast. Real men, real life, real faith. The newest podcast for men with your host, Mitch London.
All right, welcome everybody to the Wisdom and Wilderness Podcast, Real Men, Real Life, and Real Faith. And I am extremely excited and blessed for my guest today, Chris. And Chris is the founder of the Marriage Revolution. And that is a topic that I think is so crucial in today's world and so vital, marriage. It seems like it's under attack more than anything else. The family unit is under attack more than anything else in the world today. And so I'm extremely happy to have you here with us, Chris. And if you could just take a moment and kind of just give a little bit about yourself, kind of how this marriage passion started for you. I know you have an extensive history in ministry and other things, but marriage specifically, how did that come to be?
Well, first, I got to thank you so much, Mitch, for having me. And just an honor to be with you and what you're doing. I fully support Mitch and what you're doing because it's just powerful. It's what we need, what society needs is real men, real faith. And so I'm really happy that we can have an honest, just take the walls down and just have an honest conversation. So because that's what we teach. So a little bit about me. My wife and I, Tara, we founded the Marriage Revolution. It's been a long journey for us. First 10 years of our life, I was burying my head in the sand. Right, I was working my way up the corporate ladder. I was getting promotions and raises, and I was doing the right things. Mitch, in our marriage, I was coming home from my travels and taking care of the kids because Tara needed a break. And so I'd run them to soccer practice or basketball practice. But the one thing that I was missing was my communication and my ability to relate to Tara.
Yeah.
So 10 years into our marriage, we had a falling out. We had a marriage crisis to the point where I thought it was over. I went to my sister-in-law's house and my brother-in-law's and because they lived close at the time there in Ohio, and I remember weeping and crying. It's over, and I had to come to the realization that and thought pattern that another man was going to raise my 3 children. We have 3 kids, so it was brutal, but I realized that the main thing that was going on in our marriage was communication, and it's like. I had a house where we had to, I had to water the lawn. I didn't have a fancy sprinkler system. I had to man up. I had to water the lawn at times.
Go move that hose around.
That's right, move the hose. Sometimes it would just get kinked up. It's like there's no water coming out of this. I was like squirting, like what's wrong? And it's like you get all kinked up, and I'd pull on it, and we all know that didn't work. And so that was really what was going on with our marriage. Communication was bad. It wasn't healthy. And the reason why it was my fault. And it was also Tara's. Obviously, she had her baggage. I had my baggage.
Uh-huh.
But as a man, what I like about what you're doing here, as a man, we have to own it. We have to take full responsibility for whatever is going on in our household, even if some of it could be legit. It could be our wives or our children. It's got to be legit, right? Either way, we got to man up. And so I owned it, and I took the steps necessary to, I got counseling, I went to marriage retreats, and I invested into learning the skill set. And in that process, what I learned is that I had a lot of baggage, Mitch, and that baggage was what we call coping mechanisms. And what I mean by that is that I shoved things underneath the rug. I didn't talk about the things that would develop that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So with Tara, my wife, and so what happened was I would bury it because of the fact that I would withdraw. My feelings would get hurt. I'd get angry. All these things. I'd sleep on the side of the bed. All these things that when we went deep, I just couldn't go there. And everything was about the kids. It was about the dog. It was about our vacation. I was an okay marriage, and I was a pastor, right? I wasn't doing pastoring, but I was ordained and all that good stuff. So it just was ugly. So my passion, why I'm in this space, to answer your question, is because of that bump in the road that we had to actually physically work out and figure it out. And so now I'm on a mission to help other guys realize that, hey, we don't have to settle.
Right.
It's just about communication. If we can get this thing called communication down, we can actually have a great marriage. We don't have to settle for talking about the kids or talking about whatever superficial stuff. We can actually get over that and unclink that hose, that communication line, and where it flows naturally and beautifully. And we don't have to lose ourselves. We don't have to become a woman, right? That's another thing I had to learn. I didn't have to become a woman to relate to my wife. And so I learned how to complete rather than compete. And
that's powerful. Let me ask you something, because you mentioned it kind of just briefly, and I want to make sure everybody realizes this. Was there a moment in your process when things were going south that you took responsibility and said, hey, my job is to fix me, not for me to fix her, and not for me to glare and shine that big spotlight and say, look at all of your bad stuff, and that's causing me to react this way. You got to fix this so I can just be me. You took an ownership moment there. Was it like a definite decision, intentional, like, okay, I have to focus on me right now. That's all I can control?
Yeah, I was getting coached, and the coach told me this: like, you can't change other people. The two things about we as humans is that we get so much fulfillment out of giving information. But the second thing is that the other person, their fulfillment is to resist it. So we can't change another human. And so, when we had that crisis was really the moment, and I reached out when I thought our marriage was over. And sadly, most guys are like this. It's like until someone says get out, it's like, oh my goodness, we take it for granted. Like what you talk about, men are hunters. We're hunters by trade. We're hunters. It's like the hunt. And once we get our gal, we're like, hey, let's on to the next quest. And what happens is we put our wives and our relationship on a shelf. And so that's what I did. So that moment was when my coach said, Chris, you've got some baggage, and you've got to work on that. And then once I started to realize that it was me, that it was my communication, I had to own that process and bring my wife to an understanding of, hey, here's how we need to do this. It wasn't until then is when it smacked me in the face. And that's why I'm trying the best of my ability to help guys see that. Like, you don't have to come to that crisis mode where someone says, get out, to be able to wake up. So, yeah.
Yeah, communication. My wife and I, we've been married 17 years now, and we've got 4 beautiful kids. And we went through a stretch for the longest time where we had the perfect marriage. Everybody was like, yeah, you guys have got it going. You're so in love. The communication was there. And what happened in our marriage is there was an offense that came in, and that never got talked about. And so I saw something, I came across a moment where I got hurt deeply, but I didn't come out and say, hey, Shelby, this hurt my feelings. This cut me as a man way down. And my wife calls me a bottler. She's like, you just take your feelings and you stick them in a bottle, you put a lid, and then you just get rid of it. Like it never comes out. It never sees the light of day again. And so I had to work through this. But from that moment, it was several years of increasing tension. And because there was more tension and nothing was ever brought to the table and said, hey, this is what's going on. This is where we're at. Can we work through this? She was reacting to my hurts, because obviously when I'm not going to be the same person when now I'm wounded and now I'm offended and now my trust, everything starts to change. She didn't realize what was going on. She just knew that our relationship was not going in the right direction. And so in my mind, I'm like trying to fix things, and I'm working on it, and I'm doing things behind the scenes without ever informing her that I'm trying to repair anything. And it just built and built, and became more and more tension in our marriage, and more tension, which ultimately led to a moment where I remember her telling me one time, like, I don't think we're going to make it. I don't think this is going to happen. And there was faults on my side. There was faults on her side again. And it just bottled up, and it kept building and building and building, because like what you say, we didn't talk about it. Like, we didn't do that. And so I found myself in a place where I felt dead. No emotion. The inside of me was just gone, void of all life. I'm thinking, okay, how am I going to support her when we separate, when we divorce? and the kids, because she hasn't worked. She's a stay-at-home mom. I'm not a jerk. I'm not going to be like, hey, you're on your own. So I'm going to still have to pay for the housing, pay for the things. Where am I going to live? In a camper behind my truck in the woods somewhere? How am I going to do this? Pay for 2 homes. And so like my thought process was just all because of when an offense happens, I didn't
Wow.
go and say, hey, I came across this. I saw this. I, this thing happened to me, whatever the situation is. Can we talk about it? And how many times in your experience with men could like it just be nibbed in the butt right then and there and not become a 5, 6, 7, 8 year issue? It could be a 30-minute issue. Like, have you seen these with your sessions, with your counseling, and the way that you help these couples?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. Men, for some reason, we don't have, and I didn't, right? I'm just fully admit I didn't have the skill set. And get this is what's going to rock your world, Mitch. I'm a communication major. I graduated with a bachelor's degree in communication, but I didn't know how to communicate.
Not
Because,
relational communications, though, I'm guessing, right? That's a whole different ball.
yeah, because see, we're as guys, we just like, if we can just, we're so task oriented, right? If we can just like take the kids here, whatever, we're not really, here's what I like to say. Communication is not only talking about what, it's also what did you mean by that?
Mm-hmm.
And one simple thing that we can do as men is ask questions. What did you mean by that? How does that make you feel? Or express what and how this made me feel. And like you said, I'm glad you're bringing that up, because we just bottle things up. We don't think we got, and that's how women connect, is through words, right? Through connection, through talking. It's like not through a paycheck, which is what I thought. If I just get, work more at the corporate ladder and bring a good paycheck, provide for a living, that was it. No, that's just one part of the deal. We're men. We got to do all of it. So yeah, I do find that a lot interesting. But another thing that's interesting to me, Mitch, is I'll talk to many couples and separately, right? And I'll talk to the gal. And the gal's like, I'm gonna leave this guy, but I'm not going to, because I know the Bible doesn't, it's not the best thing for me. So but I'd leave him in a heartbeat if I could. And you talk to the guy, and the guy will say, oh yeah, it's good. Oh yeah, we got great marriage. Great
Things are
marriage.
awesome.
Like, oh my goodness. It's such a different perspective. And so it's just really becoming honest, really, in a marriage, and why we're in this space, and why I think God has uniquely qualified us, because I've been through this stuff, right? And now to be able to communicate emotions and feelings without becoming less of a man, it's really becoming human. It's just becoming understanding, and that's the key. The key here, the key is understanding Tara. When I can understand her, then I can communicate with her as well as myself. So yeah, it's just a really interesting thing that guys, we just need to say, okay, let's check our ego at the door and say, look, I can do a better job of communicating. I can do a better job at relating to you so that you feel loved, heard, and understood. And that takes communication for sure.
Yeah, it's seeking. I mean, we talked about, kind of what men were hunters. We try to seek these different things. But what I see is very dangerous today, and it's something that I fell prey to as well during this turbulent time of our marriage, is I wasn't getting, you've read the book, The Love Languages. Everybody has the 5 love languages. Incredible book. If you guys haven't checked it out or listened or heard it, buy the 5 love languages. Figure out what your love language is, figure out what your spouse's love language is, and then you love her in her language, not yours. It's a huge, huge tip. One of my love languages, for most men, is that affirmation, is that you're seeking attention. And when you have a turbulent marriage, when things are not going right, when the communication is not going there, what happens now in social media world is I see men and myself, you start looking for attention somewhere else. And it can start small and it can start innocent. It doesn't have to be full on adultery and full on these other things. And I mentioned to you this before, you made a post in your Facebook group asking about topics, but I think emotional affairs is something that is almost more rampant right now than physical affairs. And the behind the scenes conversations and the commenting on the photos and the looking for attention, looking for validation because something is off at home. And I think it's such a dangerous trap that men today are falling into because things may be rocky. you and your wife aren't talking real well. Maybe the sex life is diminishing and you're not having that connection. That doesn't give you permission to start seeking attention from somewhere else. That should be a flag to say, okay, I need to communicate more with my wife and figure out what's going on here. That's not the easy road though. That's not the easy conversation. And I know my wife and we have different styles of communication, which I'm sure you'll talk about as well. I always tease her that she was like a bulldog. She wanted to go for it. She wanted to hash it out. Everything on the table. We're going to get it done now. And I don't like to act impulsively. So I would much rather, at least in this, which is kind of funny because my other personality, I'm very spontaneous. But in these types of confrontation, I don't act impulsively. I want to think, I want to process, I want to make sure my thoughts are in order so I don't say something that I'm going to regret. And those two styles, when one person wants to have it out and one person wants to be quiet and go think about it, don't work real well a lot of times. And so I had to learn to change because I can't change my wife. I can't make her be a different person. I had to realize that I needed to just stand there and let her talk to me and let her get what she needed to say so I could do the process. I couldn't separate ourselves because then it was like, you're giving me the silent treatment. You don't care. Where are you invested in this relationship? I'm like, I totally care. That's why I'm not saying something because I don't want to say something that's going to be wrong. But,
That's
not
good.
understanding both sides of how we communicated caused some of those issues.
Mhm.
So for men today, and when you're guiding marriages and when you're guiding things, have you been able to identify, I don't want to say like little tricks or little things, like from the outside looking in, you can go, oh, they're kind of on rocky ground. You can probably see the signs. But if somebody's listening and going, hey, I think my marriage is great, and their wife is on the other side saying, I'd leave this sucker in a minute, what can the guy look for? Is there like a little handbag that you can give him and say, here's your tool bag for identifying that there's tension in your home?
Yeah, it's honest conversations and just saying, hey, look, we have a survey that helps couples understand where they are. A survey I wish would have had years ago. It would have saved me a lot of pain. And its ability to understand and to say, look, so here's what I do. I don't like to talk to the woman or the man. I like to talk to the woman's best friend.
Mm.
Because the woman's best friend is who she's going to go to when she doesn't feel comfortable or in an environment with a guy. And here's what I find what happens is that most guys, they just feel like it's good. To answer your question, one real big thing is sex. If you're not having sex 2 or 3 times a week, that's a red flag. I'm telling you, there's not a connection. There's something going on there. Now, certainly at certain times of these seasons of life that, maybe something's going on that, like entrepreneur world or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
that's one litmus test. Oh gosh, I guess I'll pop up. Oh, as long as we're still on, okay. I got pop-up window that we're not going to be connected here. So, okay, so that's so the litmus test is really the sex, the communication, but honest questions to the other person, how they really feel. And what I find is that most couples don't have an environment for two people to really be honest,
Mm-hmm.
because either the guy or the girl feels like they already have a one-headed monster, like we have this issue, we're not connecting, I don't feel valued, I don't feel heard, I don't feel loved. Okay, but if they think that the other person isn't going to respond correctly, like in a manner that's like not full of anger, like slamming doors or yelling or screaming, or maybe withdraw. I do that because it's like a turtle. Turtles go in their shell,
Uh-huh.
and that's what most men will do. They'll withdraw. They'll put the silent treatment on. And so when that happens, then most couples don't address it, and they'll go on with their life. They'll go on with their career. They'll go on taking care of kids. They'll pour themselves into alternate affections because, well, I'm not getting what I need out of this marriage. Well, maybe, like you talked about, I'll go here or I'll go there. Women will go to other women. That's why I like to talk to the women's best friend and ask them what's going on. So to answer your question is, like I said, it's sex. It's where you're not communicating, where emotions are not being dealt with and not having deeper conversation, if just superficial communication, then yeah, that's definitely a red flag. But if we can get through that, then certainly we're going to be on the road to recovery. Because and just be honest, or create an environment where the man owns this. The man has to own the environment for a woman to be able to feel comfortable enough that says, okay, you're free. I'm not going to respond with hurt feelings, with sleeping on the side of the bed, with anger, whatever. I create an environment for the woman to be real. Then you can actually now have good communication and connect with your wife and be able to have, sex or whatever. Good, healthy communication.
Oh yeah, and it's so, yeah, you can see it looking back. Hindsight, of course, is 2020, and you can see the signs once you've gone through the mud and once you've been dragged through the valleys and you on the recovery side of things. I can see so many different instances in my own example of where it was at. I sought validation from somewhere else, and so one of my favorite quotes comes from a book called Man's Search for Meaning, but written by Viktor Frankl, and he was a concentration camp Holocaust survivor, and he tells a story. It's not from a Christian perspective, but just from a life perspective. When people have purpose and meaning, they will live, they will persevere. And he could almost guarantee or call it, when the light in somebody's eyes would go out, how much longer they have left to live on this planet. So he could see it within these camps of like, that guy has given up hope. He'll be dead within 2 weeks. And you just know once that fight is gone, that is. And so he has this quote. It says, man is not searching for pleasure. He's searching for meaning. When he can't find meaning, he drugs himself with pleasure. And I think that kind of sums up a lot of relationships and a lot of men specifically today. When I first read that, it was like one of the sucker punch to the gut kind of moments. Like, oh my goodness, I see that. For me, it was the outdoors. I love the outdoors. My ministry is about the outdoors. But when things were really rocky within my marriage, I would hop in my car and I'd take my camera and I'd go into nature. I just was escaping. I was drugging myself away from having to face the reality of what was going on. And through doing this is kind of where my attention came from. So I like to do photography. So I would post my pictures on Instagram. I'd post my pictures on things and people started liking them. I started getting attention. And then it becomes like this addiction thing. We're like, okay, my habits have now shifted away from my family. My habits have now shifted. My hobbies are no longer inclusive to my family unit or my wife. My hobby is now me going out here to do this thing because it's this dopamine hit when somebody loves what I'm doing. And they tell me what a wonderful photographer I am. And they fill me up and I'm trying to get this, my love tank full in these other ways, which is dangerous because anytime that you're now seeking something outside from God, our first source, and then your wife, who you have now become one with, and you're now looking in the third place to find validation, it's so unhealthy. So when our marriage came to a head and came to a crash and we're as far into a divorce as you can be without signing the paperwork, it was God who had to walk me through it. I didn't have a circle of men around me that I trusted. There was a lot of hurts. There was other offenses. When you kind of get to that thing, when you're offended, everything offends you. And it's a toxic habit also. But I had to walk through this with just God and me. My wife came to me. She submitted. She's like, I apologize. I seek your forgiveness. She wanted our marriage. She was fighting for our marriage way more than I was fighting for our marriage. But I couldn't see it. Like I was so just turned off that I was like, no, like I don't want, just don't touch me, get away from me. We were just in this horrible place. But my question is have you noticed kind of in your experience that men with that circle of men who speak life into them have this group of guys, mentors, just influence, avoid these challenges more than the man who is the lone wolf, the tough guy out on my own who can do it by myself?
Do they avoid them if they're together?
Right. Have you seen a big separation of if this guy has mentors and friends who are speaking life into him, we don't see the situations get as bad versus the dude who's by himself.
Yeah, and that's why we have the community, the Marriage Revolution. When people go in the same direction, birds of a feather flock together. If we go in the same direction, that we just need each other. Iron sharpens iron, the Bible talks about. And that's where you can see and live by other people's, the wisdom, what I've been told is that wisdom, it's good when you learn from your mistakes. It's better, like your podcast about wisdom, it's even better to learn from others' mistakes.
Yeah.
That's why we do what we do. And yeah, absolutely. When you're a lone wolf, and that's what most guys do, is that when things get difficult, they hide. They don't get on social media, or they don't talk to people. Oh, everything's fine because of shame. And it all goes back to Adam and Eve. I mean, he's the first person who blamed the woman, right? So, and that's what most men do. It's all her fault. And so let me just give you that little, I love what you said with the love language, but let me go one step further. Another little tip. Not only do you want to find out what your love language is, but now what we like to help couples with is be able to help them understand, how is that expressed? Because for so many years, my wife's love language was gifts. And so I'm thinking, oh man, she's gonna need the car, she's gonna need a Gucci purse, she's gonna need all those, until I actually asked her, like, what does this look like? What does this feel like? Just a rose, $2 rose. If you just think of me when I'm not around, that's all I'm looking for. Like, oh my goodness. So for so many years, I didn't speak her love language because I just thought she wanted like a guy. I'm a bigger car, a bigger house, a bigger, whatever. And so what we take couples through is to help them, they like if they say gifts, what does that look like and feel like for you? And get it to your spouse, right? And so the spouse is like, so they don't have to read your mind, but yeah, it's an interesting field. You know what I also found is that a lot of guys, we have differences, right? We have gaps. Like here's my gaps, and here's Tara's gaps, my wife, and that's why we marry. We don't realize it. We don't realize that's why we marry, because we have similarities, like going to movies, and we like to go out to dinner, like take walks, and the attraction, the physical attraction. So those are why we marry. But then what happens to most guys, and where we're going with this, is that most guys think that, now there's difficulties. Well, that must not be the one. That must not, God must have changed her, or God must have changed me, and I'm just a different person. And maybe we are as we grow, but as we have gaps, we realize that we have gaps, and we're to complete, not to compete. Mm-hmm. And what those gaps come in is that it's a matter of understanding what the differences are. And so what happens in most couples is that the similarities is why we marry, but it's in our dissimilarities what's highlighted now, because the other similarities we're more comfortable. We understand that. But if we can just understand those differences, oh man, it's night and day. So that's what I want to give the hope for most guys out there. If you're in a situation where you're fighting, or you're arguing, you just can't communicate, another key thing is that you don't listen to me, or you don't hear me, or you don't understand me. Oh my goodness, those are red flags. Guys, like of the utmost, like a number 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. Those are total red flags. We've got to get underneath that, because I was told the same thing, and I ran right through them. So that's what happens, is that those things happen when we just don't understand the other person. Our differences are now trying to, Satan, we have an enemy who wants to separate us. And we just don't want to go there.
Well, I mean, yeah, one of the famous scriptures, everybody knows it, is lean not on your own understanding. And so many times our own understanding or interpretation of things gets in the way and screws up what could be a simple solution. So like what you mentioned, what does gifts look like? My interpretation is one thing, but your interpretation is another thing. Even though I know the general category, it's empty. And then it could lead to frustration. Like, I'm giving you gifts. You love gifts. You tell me this is your love language, and I'm doing all these things for you. I'm buying all this stuff for you. And it's just like as if you were trying to do a totally different love language, because again, you're not getting into that interpretation of things. And as men, when we lean on our own interpretation and we lean on our own understanding, and we don't have, I'm kind of going back to this influence of having mentors, or having at least a group of guys that will speak life into you. Not guys who are encouraging you to get divorced, not guys that are siding with you always. You need guys that are going to look you in the face and say, you're wrong. You're acting wrong. You can't see it right now, but I need you to understand that you're in the wrong, and you can't sin in your anger and those kinds of things as well. Mm-hmm. But having those shields together, and I've been seeing this so many times. So for what I do, and I take men on retreats out into the woods, we go backpacking. There's an
Yeah.
interview process before you can come, because there's a sanctity to this group of men when we get them together. But the
Mhm.
number one most powerful part of these events is not me. It's not what I teach. It's not all the curriculum and all the things that I put together. It's the guy sitting next to you around the campfire, the guy that is locking shields with you and can believe in you and can kick you in the pants when you need it. Men like to be challenged. You see it on social media all the time. If there's a challenge involved in a group, guys are going to do it. We're going to do this challenge. We like to prove ourselves. We like to
Yeah.
kind of go through that. But we need to be challenged by men that we trust as well. And I can't stress the importance of having guys, because for me, for so long, I did not have friends, men that I could go to or even surround myself with that were going to speak life to me. A lot of,
Yeah.
and it's hard, I think, even for couples, because my wife, she would have a friend, a lady friend, and her husband I thought was just a bonehead. Like we're not on the same page. And so then it's hard to go do things as couples with other couples. But it's so crucial to find those men that will help lift you up and help hold you to a standard that they know God has placed before us. And so
Yeah.
it's just, again, I can't stress that enough for everybody that's listening, is if you don't have guys around, get involved in some kind of men's ministry, get involved in some small groups in your community, find a way to get around other men who have a life and a picture, even if it's just on the outside for the beginning, looks like what is in the right direction. You
Yeah.
need to have that support, and you need to have those kinds of things. Can you identify, or do you have certain men that were very pivotal for you, even early on or even now later in your life, where that mentorship role, sometimes it's our father, sometimes it's a best friend's dad, sometimes it's somebody else. But can you think of somebody that's jumping in your mind that was a pivotal mentor and helping to shape you as who you are now?
Yeah. There's a gentleman who was my fifth grade gym teacher. Uh, and he was actually at my wedding, and when I had a crisis even before Tara, um, it's yeah, he was there absolutely. You know, men, the thing to understand in my world, what I've learned is you know, don't tell me what I want to hear, tell me what I need to hear. And that's what you're talking about, guys who will tell you what you need to hear so you can get better, right? And that's what you're talking about, is getting a group of guys who are together, who you're on the same mission of getting this better, being the best husband, being the best father, being the best businessman. And so, yeah, absolutely, it's pivotal. And yes, I do have people like that in my life, even today, even after, you know, being in ministry for so long and being a Christian for 33 years. I have to have people in my life to speak into my world. In fact, I'm part of a couple of different groups where guys are that are only men's group, and this is what we talk about. So yeah, if you're not in a men's group, it's like this whole thing, this will, like a challenge. If we can make it a challenge to grow, you know, just like the Bible talks about in Ephesians, as we grow in our knowledge of God. Well, it's a process, and we have to grow, and we have to develop, and we have to. It's just like going to the gym. You just don't like cross it off one time and say, "I'm
Mm-hmm.
never going to the gym again." It's like it's a relationship. It's like our marriage. It's like a relationship with our guy friends. And let me just encourage the guys in your group. It's like there's a place where I can go with guys that I can't with Tara. And what's another danger point is saying, Tara's my girl, my best friend. It's like, if that's your best friend, bro, no, absolutely, red flag. Yeah, I mean, they're close. They're your best girl, but we need men. We need to we you got to admit we're just different, men. That's why the whole book, men are from Mars and women from Venus. And so when a woman, you know, another red flag when a woman says, "Oh, my husband's my best friend," it's like it's cool. Like we like to think that, but no, there's places where Tara can go with a girl, with a girlfriend, that she can't go with me because I just don't understand it. I'm a dude, right? And that's what you're talking about. And so, yeah, absolutely, Mitch. You're like 100% head on, and that's how we're going to be successful with either our relationships and with our business. Whatever we're doing is realizing that with iron sharpens iron.
So this next thought's going to get a little controversial, but it's going to
Okay.
talk about submission. And
Yeah.
part of men submitting to God first, but then
Mhm.
submitting to this other group of men to allow them to speak into you. I think that's an important point that I didn't mention, is that you actually have to give permission, and you have to actually open up and be willing to give somebody that right to come and get in your face if they need to call you up, send you that text, whatever it is, pull you aside. You have to position yourself in your heart to receive that and give that like tell them, I give you permission. You are an accountability brother to me to call me on my crap. If I am not acting right, I need somebody else to tell me this. And so I am actually submitting this authority and this responsibility to you.
Yeah.
That's a crucial part. The controversial side in the Bible, women submit to your husbands, or wives submit to your husbands. Just, walk me through that, because I think that it's a hard thing for people, because maybe it's our definition of submission, but there's an abuse on one side of the scale where men are like, you have to do, you're my slave. If I command it and demand it, you have to do it. And on the other side, it's a hard thing to submit to somebody who might be out of alignment, who might not be submitting to God in the right way, who might have their beliefs a little bit changed or different. How have you walked through this? I'm sure you have, with many couples, because that's a hot topic within the Christian community, of those few little verses. But I think so many of them misunderstand what that means.
Yeah. Well, you just got to go to Ephesians 5, where it talks about specifically how Christ, love your wife as Christ loved the church and gave himself up. Gave himself up for the church. This dude went to the cross. He bore his stripes. He took stripes. So for men to say like submission means like you're going to do what I say, now that's erroneous, because Christ gave himself up. His last words, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. He was willing to go to the cross and submit to the world's sin. He took sin on himself because he had to submit to the Father. He submitted to the Father. So what that means is really, it's complete. It's to complete your role. And your role as a husband is to lead, but not to lord. And that's what I like to tell people. We are to lead, not to lord over wives. And so that whole gap thing that I like to teach, if we fill gaps, it's that whole thing also in Genesis. It's a helpmate is to complete. It's nowhere in the Bible is it like a positional or a hierarchical type of thing. It's completion. That's the whole thing about communication. Communication has to be in the same frequency, not like you ever tune a radio and you're dialing. I'm dating myself, so I know. You go until you get the connection to a specific number, and it's like right there. That's what communication is, and that's the whole thing with what you're talking about, submission and all that. It's not like someone's over here and someone. It's not. It's complete, and that's what's really with the Greek and the Hebrew. And I'll go to Matt on this one, because it's Christ gave himself up for the church.
I think a lot of times what happens is we misinterpret, and I can usually tell when I'm talking to somebody about their marriage, if they're very Old Testament or if they're New Testament, if they're worried about judgment and wrath, or if they're looking at love and mercy. And so as Christ loved the church, how did Christ view the church? This was a cherished thing. It was a precious thing. It was an honorable thing. It was something that was worth his life. And I think when we forget this, that the next that we skip over, I love my wife. Yeah, I love her. Now she needs to submit to me. She needs to honor me. She needs to, do what I say. And that it just drives me bonkers. It's like you get that holy anger just rising up in you, like, no, this is not the way that Jesus came to do and to treat the church. He was mad at some people, yes, the Pharisees, and it talks about washing your wife in the word and all this kind of stuff, but I see it misused. And it's a frustrating thing to watch happen, because I think the view of Jesus and what view Jesus had of the church is lost. They forget the love. I didn't come to the world to condemn. Number one, I didn't come to condemn. I came to free people from bondage, not place them in more bondage with rules and lording over and all that kind of stuff. From the wives' side, what's that process look like as you're walking through from the women's side of helping them understand that, maybe your husband's being a bonehead right now, but this is what God is calling you to do as your role.
Yeah. 1 Corinthians 10 talks about, what happened in the church is that you had people getting, born again, saved, and one of them got saved and one of them didn't. So what do you do in that scenario? Like, and it's to be the example. And that's what we tell couples is like, you be the example. We have the 100-100 rule. And that 100, what that means is that as I give myself to Tara and one of me or her need to understand what she's at, and she does the same for me, all my needs will get met.
And that is biblical.
A lot
Christ
of
gave himself 100% of himself.
Yeah, exactly. Not 50. Well, I got to get my needs. Hey, I got my needs. Mm-hmm. Well, we have to change that shift, the mindset to say, when I serve my wife and my wife serves me, then I'll get my needs met. But in this scenario, I would say either one, because there's always going to be some levels of growth where some people, sadly, it's women who will want to grow because they're more relationship. And this is where we teach. We try to help get guys to say, look, you don't have to, lose the fact that you want to hunt or whatever. You just have to become human. And so you have to just say, you know what, we own where we are. I like to draw a circle around myself, and I tell couples, draw a circle around yourself. You own that response. So in your scenario, Mitch, is that if a wife is married to a bonehead, she's just going to have to realize that God is her provider. God is the source of her strength. God is her, certainly she would love for her man to go alongside of her and be that support structure. But in that meantime, she has to own her response, just like a man has to own his response, right? As he submits to Christ. And so when we do that, when we find our source, when we find our significance in him, then she will be able to say, it'll be harder. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. It's going to be harder, especially when a guy does bonehead things. She has to, and he has to, realize that who they are in Christ and submit to the one. And when we do that, and Galatians 5:23 will guide us. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, all the fruits of the Spirit. When we're focused on that and being that example, realizing that if a woman is married to a bonehead, if she is that example, that maybe he'll just see it and be attracted to it. And that's what the picture is illustrated in 1 Corinthians 10, is being that example to the point where, the other person is, wants what that other person has.
Yeah, we talk about alignment, that the man has a responsibility to be in alignment with God. And you as the wife also have a responsibility to be in alignment with God and what God is asking everybody to do. So if one person's out of alignment, does not give you permission for you to then go and be out of alignment, and then both of you are screwed up. Yeah. It's hard, it's tough, but sometimes it's that patience of knowing and believing that when God says that all things will work together for your good, that there will come a moment of restoration, that this does happen. I firmly believe that if you are faithful and you're walking in your alignment with Christ and you're doing what he's asked you to do, then the other stuff finds a way to work itself out. Somebody will come into their life, soften their heart, help speak some life into them. Situations turn around all the time. It seems instantly, and a word that God has been teaching me and walking me through and highlighting is suddenly. Suddenly doesn't mean instantly, but when it happens, it's sudden. It's a drastic shift. When Israel got freed from Egypt, that wasn't sudden. That was 400 years. Or that wasn't instant, but it was sudden. All this, go, and here's the riches. Here's everything, go with, get out. It was very sudden departure, not, instant, so to speak. And so it is tough. And sometimes that you have to bite your tongue and just lean in to that relationship with Jesus and find that strength in that place. But it's encouraging, I think, and what we're talking about here is, if you're listening and if you're in these scenarios, is to understand your role and your responsibilities. What is God asking you to do? You can't force your husband to do what he's being commanded to do by God. God has to work on him for that. It's not your job to remind him of how horrible he's being. Because when there's tension and you guys are clashing all of the time, it doesn't help soften anybody's heart. Like you said, as that example. If we're constantly in strife and if we're constantly bickering at each other, picking at each other, it doesn't make me want to say, you know what, you've been really tearing me down today, and I think I'm going to be a better man now. That just doesn't happen.
Hanging never works.
Yeah. And so it's just, be that example and focus in on your responsibilities. Focus in on showing love. Focus in on loving extra, because who can resist somebody who is just so kind and so serving? Jesus knew Judas was going to betray him. And the night before, he's washing his feet. It's like, okay, this is what's going on. This is what's happening. Like, I'm having dinner with you. I'm still treating you with the absolute most love, even though I know what you're about to do. Now, we don't have the benefit of always knowing what our spouses are about to do, but our job is just to love, to show them kindness, to show them mercy, to show them the grace that we would expect from God. We judge others by their actions and ourselves by our intentions. We have to kind of extend that same grace to other things on that. But I wanted to ask you, kind of now shifting a little bit, what's on the horizon for the marriage revolution? What do you guys have coming up? What do you guys have going? Where's like the main focus in the heart right now?
Yeah. Well, our course is just about done. We're getting, we have a couple speaking gigs here next month or so.
Nice.
But what's really exciting is that, well, I don't know if I should, we're going to get on the biggest stages of TV that you can possibly imagine here soon.
Nice.
We have a special friend. Tara's been on TV, on TBN. And so our story is going to get out because, like I said, God has uniquely positioned Tara and I to be able to be real, and people connect with us because, the marriage space is so sensitive because to trust people with, hey, can you help? And so, that's really what's on the horizon: speaking gigs and courses and further coaching and all of that. But it's really about understanding, like you talked about, love. Love is adjusting, like you mentioned. Love is adjusting our communication to another human. And that's the greatest form of. That's how a man can connect. Say, hey, I'm gonna understand you and how you're wired, and talk to you in that frequency. So, so where we're going with it is being able to get that message out, more in depth, more succinctly with a course. And so, with that, that's where we're going.
I love it. And I got to say, there's a lot of marriage gurus out there. It's a hot topic. It's a hot space. It seems like you have an endless supply of potential people to help in these times that we live in. There's a lot of marriages under fire. But one of the things that I would say just instantly with you and Tara, you guys aren't screwed up. You're not perfect, but I see a lot of marriage couples that still haven't dealt with their own baggage, and it comes across in their messaging. It comes across in their videos. It comes across in things like, I can't come to you because it looks like you're worse than I am. And I really appreciate that. You guys are so open, so raw, so genuine. If you get a chance to watch one of Chris's videos on Facebook or something, you just feel it instantly. The heart is there for the right reasons. You've gone through it and you've handled your own garbage. You've gotten that alignment with put Christ first in your household. And it's really out of this now, not a market. You're not marketing to marriages. It's a mission. It's a mandate. It's something that supersedes the financial, that supersedes the business side of things. It's what you're called to do and help. And it's what you've been specifically gifted to be able to pour and to sow into other people. And it comes across because a lot of people, their passion, their purpose sucks the life out of them because it's not actually what they're supposed to be doing. When they're pouring, their cup is empty and there's not as much. And you can see in you and Tara's life that I've been able to witness in just a short time that you're living out of an overflow. This is an area that doesn't get you tired. It's not draining you. It's not sucking the life out of you. This is the extra because God has filled us up in our marriage so much that now our extra is able to help you. And it's wonderful to see. So I just commend you on that and let you know that it comes across in your messaging, that it comes across on your social media, just from my side of things. But how can people find you? Where can they connect with you? The links and, drop your info.
Yeah, just do the marriagerevolution.com. Go to our link. Look, you'll see Chris and Tara, like you said, totally transparent and raw about our story. And we have a little survey there. Take it to the top if you want to understand where you really are. If you can take the guard down and have your wife take it. There's a little survey here. It's awesome. Takes about 10 minutes. But themarriagerevolution.com. Just check us out on our website. And Mitch, thank you for those kind words because. Certainly, this has not been something that it's been something I thought for many, many years, right? And until God had to get a hold of me, because I was going to take I was going to take this message, or take the message of personalities and structure in corporate, because I spent so many years in corporate America. But yeah, this certainly is something that God is saying, you know what? No, this is what you need. And you're going to get to see that on the airwaves here very shortly.
That is awesome. And I would encourage anybody listening right now, if this is piquing your interest at all, there's a reason that it's piquing your interest. The Holy Spirit's probably got a megaphone in your ear trying to get your attention and trying to get you to pay attention to something differently. So if this is kind of sparking that, hey, maybe is my marriage good? If you have questions, if you don't know, then my marriage is awesome. If there's some doubt, if there's a crack of wavering that's going in there, then start following these guys, start reaching out, take the assessments. Don't wait 5, 6, 7, 8 years until your marriage is destroyed and then try and put it back together. If there's a small crack, it can be fixed now versus totally shattered and trying to piece it back together. That's a bigger process. So don't wait. Don't hesitate. If you're having issues with marriage, reach out. These guys are phenomenal at what they do and can definitely help. So I just want to thank you again, Chris. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and I'd love to get you back on, and maybe both you and your wife at the same time. And talk as a couple would be fun to do as well, because marriage is, my heart and my opinion, is that the enemy is after the home, the marriages specifically. My mission is to help the man stand up in his position so everything else can go, and it's a domino effect. Yeah. If the guy will do what he's supposed to do, most times everything else starts working better. So men, you got to stand up, you got to take accountability, you got to take that ownership and realize that your role is crucial to a family unit. And I can't stress that enough. But thank you so much again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
You've been listening to the Wisdom in Wilderness podcast. Real men, real life, real faith. The newest podcast for men with your host, Mitch London. We'll see you next time.